Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card featuring cat scrappiness. I made this card a while ago, back when I was on the cat scrappiness design team, and I shared it then, so if it looks familiar, that's probably why, but I didn't get a chance to share the video tutorial. So I'm going to be using the cat scrappiness stitched scallop rectangles and ovals, the Stewart the Sloth stamp set, and the Mystic Leaves sprinkles. I'm going to start by creating a patterned paper for, well, I guess it's not technically the background because the background is where the sloth is going to be, but for like the main part of the card. So I am using Twisted Citron Distress ink, which is a really bright green distress ink, and I'm going to cover most of this card panel. You could, of course, just pick out some lime green cardstock. I just didn't have any that was the color that I was necessarily going for. So I don't ink the center, and that's just because that's where I already know I am going to be cutting out my shaker part of the card. So I'm just kind of trying to save myself a little bit of time and ink, although there's plenty of ink everywhere right now. And this was before I made my little ink sprayer box, which has been a real, I don't know, it just makes my desk less messy, but I'm very happy with it. And all it was is a cut up box from Amazon. So I was very happy to make something for free that was so helpful to not getting my desk quite as messy as I have in the past. Anyway, I'm going to be using some Lucky Clover and Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide inks to stamp some leaves to create this pattern paper for around my shaker. These leaves are also from the Stewart the Sloth stamp set, so I just kind of wanted to show you an idea for what to do with those little stamps. This is something that I do a lot with little stamps, is just create my own pattern paper. I use Distress Oxide inks because I just have a lot of colors of them, but it doesn't really matter. Any dye inks would have done all the techniques that I'm doing today because it's just laying ink down and stamping on top of it. I'm so familiar with the colors of Distress ink because the Distress Oxide inks are the same color as the Distress inks, and so I've been working with them for years. When I do something like this, I don't usually worry too much about filling in the gaps, because here I'm just literally stamping the leaves right on top of each other. I'm not going for a realistic look like these leaves, in theory you wouldn't be able to see through them, but I'm not worried about that kind of thing. You could add a bit more interest by using some additional colors of green or by making your background not a solid color green. Sometimes it does help to have even smaller stamps, like if there were a little tiny leaf, to fill in some of those extra spaces. But in this case, I think it worked out just to keep layering the leaves on top of each other. And it just looks like a dense sort of bushy forest. And my sloth is going to go in the center of it. I felt like I didn't have quite enough of the Lucky Clover. Generally, I try to kind of balance out the colors, but there's really no right or wrong way to do it, which is what makes it such a fun technique. I also love that Distress Oxide inks clean off your stamps so easily. You just can wipe it off and you don't have to worry about it. So I have stamped my sloth on a piece of cardstock that is Copic friendly with Copic friendly ink, but my sentiment I am going to stamp with VersaFine ink, and that's just because I tend to get a better, crisper impression for sentiments with that ink. And I want to make sure that the sentiment will show through. So I'm not worried about centering my sloth on the, it doesn't matter where my sloth is because I can shift that around. So I stamped him in the center of the page, but I'm going to offset it. And I want to make sure my sentiment is where it needs to be. That's kind of more of the concern. If the sloth is hanging out a little bit, it doesn't really matter. So we're going to go into the coloring. I was really inspired by the Mystic Leaves sprinkles. When they came in at the same time the sloth did, and I saw the leaves that were in the stamp set, I thought all of this will go really well together, and that's why I stamped that leaf background paper because I just really wanted to like emphasize all the leaves. I used G19 and G16 to add some really simple shading to the leaves there. And then I'm going to go in and color the tree trunk using the E markers. I started with E29. I messed up a little bit there at the beginning, and I accidentally colored part of the sloth's face. Luckily, Zero marker to the rescue. The Copic colorless blender will push out any color that you didn't want. I'm going to keep my blending really simple here. Like for all of those leaves, I put my shadows at the part where the leaf touches the tree trunk. And then with the tree trunk, I just put my shadows all along the top because the sloth would be casting a shadow onto the top. And now I'm ready to color in my sloth. Today I decided to use the warm grays for the sloth. Those are generally my preferred grays. If you look at a sloth, he kind of has a bit of a, or they kind of have a bit of a brown look to them. And the warm grays are a sort of like, they're warm, but that means they have more of a brown undertone than say the cool grays, which have more of, I guess you would describe it as a blue undertone. So I'm going to start with W7 as my darkest color and then blend all the way out to, I believe this is a W1. I would just encourage you to use whatever grays you have. If you don't have grays, I would also just think that some browns, some lighter browns might look good with the sloth as well. So I'm making a lot of errors today, and I just wanted to kind of share the little tips for how I'm recovering from them. There is, of course, as I mentioned before, the zero marker. So I've gotten out of the lines a few times. The zero marker is going to save me there. I smeared my ink, but part of the reason that I smeared my ink is because I actually didn't do a great job stamping that sentiment. Even though I use VersaFine, which generally one stamp and it's fine, I messed up. I didn't put enough even pressure, and so I had to trace over the sentiment, and then I didn't let it dry before I started coloring, and now here I am like rubbing my hand in it. I am using an even lighter marker for the face area. So while on the body, the lightest marker was the W3, I'm going to use W3, 1, and 0, 0 for that sort of face area. I want to, again, keep his shadows kind of simple. So I'm trying to do things like highlighting the face, making him look round. You generally can make a critter or any object actually look round by shading either the top and bottom or the left and right side. And so then by having a highlight in the center, that looks like it's coming towards you. That looks sort of like the rounded part. So if you're not sure what kind of shading you want to add to an animal, my general suggestion would be to just pick top and bottom or right and left and give it a little bit of dimension. In terms of the area around his eye, I went back to the darker markers. And once he was all colored, I'm just going to think about where he needs to be in relation to the shaker. I'm not centering it on the shaker. I'm just sort of, pulling him around to where he needs to be, cutting off any excess. And I'm going to lay that one down first. So I've put sticky behind him before I've even worked on my shaker, because that's going to be the most important thing, that he's framed up correctly. I forgot that I wanted to add some black, so I'm going to pause, put my black mat down. I love the way black really helps things like pop off the page without adding any dimension, but like it's going to pull in the black from the stamping and just give him a little bit more. So there, it's crooked, but again, that doesn't matter because all it matters is that it's centered in the frame. That actual panel isn't really important. So now that I have that where I like it, I'm going to add some foam tape all around it. And I'm also going to put a piece of clear acetate over the window. Once that's all set up, I'm ready to add my sprinkles. I tend to be pretty generous. If I'm making a shaker card, I like to put a lot in there. For instance, in this card, when you put the card sitting upright, as if you were like displaying it on a shelf, it will actually cover the sentiment. And I thought that was kind of fun. Like that was my intention, is that it covers the sentiment and then you shake it and it reveals the sentiment. So there's the foam tape. It is double layered. I do recommend that for shakers. I feel like they shake better. I do also recommend an embossing powder bag to get any of the extra stickiness. So I rub it over the acetate window. I touch the foam tape with it so that foam helps to get any of that extra stickiness that your sequins will stick to. And so now you can see that if you shake it around, you reveal and unreveal the sentiment and him. And that's why I like to have a lot of shaker fill in there. It's just my personal preference. So basically that is it for my card today. If you like this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will leave you links in the video description below to the products that I mentioned, and I'll also leave you links to some other videos you can check out if you're interested. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Have an awesome day. Bye.